In this list of duties, usually the one most emphasized is the one about teaching truth to lead to the good of life. Well, women are very concerned about the good of life, and they are constantly teaching to lead to the good of life as mothers, as teachers, as wives, as well as people that work as employees and as bosses in workplaces. So we see that not as something exclusively male. And so it seems to us that this list could work as well for a woman as it can for a man.
So what about representing the Lord? Well, priests represent the Lord, as seen in these numbers, because priests lead people to be saved, like the Lord's divine goodness does. The office of the priest is what represents the Lord, not the person taking on the office. Any kind of person, good or bad, who is a priest represents the Lord. So it is not the maleness of a priest that represents the Lord. For example, both a prophet and a prophetess represent one who teaches the truth. Next, we look at the characteristics and other duties of priests. So from doing a search for clergy, priests, and ministers in the writings, we found some of the characteristics that the writings list for priests.
One characteristic that priests ought to aspire to is to be enlightened. And here's a quote describing enlightenment. To have perception in spiritual things, a person must have an affection for truth, stirred by good, and must have an unceasing desire to know truths. This leads to an enlightenment of the understanding part of his mind, and once it has been enlightened, he is able to, within himself, to see a thing with perception.
And we know women that are like this in our church. Women who have affection for truth, stirred by good. And I know very well the unceasing desire to know truths that exist in my wife. From TCR, we learn that this enlightenment is turned into both heat and light. With women, it may be more likely to tend towards heat, and with men towards light. But we believe that it affects the heat and light in both men and women. Thus, enlightenment coming from the Lord is turned into light and heat of various kinds, differing in each person's case in accordance with his mental state.
Enlightenment is directly from the Lord, seemingly like a light shining down. In men it will be received in a different way than it is with women. But that light seems to shine down on both equally, like the sun in the heavens, affecting each one according to their unique minds, and according to the person's openness from their particular love of truth and goodness. The more men and women can share their unique kinds of enlightenment with each other, the more complete will the enlightenment be.
Another characteristic necessary for priests is perception, and the quality of the perception depends on how good the church's doctrine is. But this doctrine is the same for both the men and the women in our church. Perception is different in men and women, as shown in conjugal love, Numbers 165 to 168. Women have their perception from love and men from the intellect, but they both have perception.
Here are more characteristics that Swedenborg lists that are applicable to a priest. Priests must be able to be taught, and we know that all people can be taught. Many women are recognized to be very capable students. Marry people. Priests need to perform and witness marriages and betrothals. This is for the main purpose of hearing, receiving, confirming, and consecrating the consent in the name of the Lord. Priests or ministers need to be able to reflect the Lord's love when doing this duty. Women love weddings and thus easily represent and reflect the Lord's love in bringing two people together in marriage. Church internals. The clergy are to be concerned with internal elements of the church. Both men and women show this concern. Attribute holiness. Clergy must attribute holiness to the word and to sacraments. Both men and women show regard for holiness. Remove falsity. Clergy must root out falsities. Women are known for speaking up for the truth, as expressed in CL 294.
Ministers must lead citizens of a country to truth by teaching it. From experience, it seems that women can learn truths from the church and the word and then teach them. They can teach that everything good comes from God and that we cannot gain anything that is not given us from heaven, as it says in Divine Providence 291. They can teach truths that lead to good for the sake of truth and good, from AC 8121.
Priests obtain occupational knowledge of the clergy as discussed in CL 163. This is a characteristic women in our church do not have, only because they have not been allowed access to the training. This topic was addressed earlier in this paper, in the section dealing with the book Conjugal Love.
Section 3. The potential benefits of a male and female clergy.
In this portion of our video, we'll be presenting a series of tables with a lot of text in them. And for each section of text that we'll put up on the screen, we'll hold it there for about 3 seconds. So if you'd like to read that, just pause. Otherwise, just let it go by and it'll go on to the next one. In this first table, you'll see concepts from particular numbers in the book Conjugal Love. And Swedenborg tends to, in the numbers, first talk about husbands and wives, some concept about husbands and wives, and then he'll take that same concept and generalize to men and women. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see the concept in regards to husbands and wives, and then on the right-hand side, you'll see the same concept generalized about men and women. In this second table, you'll see on the left listed the benefits that come from a partnership of husband and wife working together. And on the right hand, you'll see that same topic generalized to the benefits of a situation in which men and women work together in a group effort. The final table takes the concepts from the table you just saw and puts them into concise statements that show the possible benefits that could come out of a joint male and female clergy.
A diagram of a single united conjugal pair might look like the one shown here, with the husband and wife sharing the love and wisdom. So in this diagram, we have the formation of church doctrine, policy, and sermons if we had a male and female clergy. In the center, inmost drive is a love of growing wise. The next circle out is supported by logic, it's foundational. In the next circle, morality closely joined to affections, and in the outermost is affectionate and caring. Section 4. 2 non-number based arguments against women in the ministry, next steps, and conclusions. The first non-number based argument is that there are no women priests in the Old and New Testaments.
Our world culture has been a patriarchy for thousands of years, and the good news is that we don't have to set present and future policy on past precedents, especially with this new revelation that really emphasizes a marriage in all things between good and truth and love and wisdom, and the importance of the interplay between the male and female in marriage. So this is something that I think is supposed to change.
The second argument, non-number based, against women in ministry is the decline of churches that have women priests. And the example given in some papers have been the decline in the membership of the convention church. And this is, this is sort of extrapolating a cause for something that you don't really have any kind of controlled experiment for, and it's not really something that that you can do and justify saying. There could be many other factors involved. The difference between convention and the general church in the way it's structured, more centralized structure versus a more democratic structure, and the way convention is chosen to be more integrated with the Christian community around it. So these are things that could also be factors, and also just a decline in churches overall. So we do not think this is a good cause to put towards why women should not be priests for the general church. And now for some concluding remarks.
We conclude that due to the misunderstanding of our forefathers, the policy to exclude women as priests has been a mistake. And this error is harming our church. The error was primarily first made due to culture, the culture at the time that the general church was formed, and then cultural perspectives became associated with things Swedenborg had written.
And from reading papers by ministers, the error of thinking that only men could be priests comes from a misunderstanding of the dynamics of marriage and from misunderstanding women. And it's not really surprising that this would happen because the way we do things in the church is the male clergy goes off and studies a topic on their own and then writes a paper. And this trying to understand women and the dynamics of men and women could best be done in consultation with women and in reviewing that with them.
The second reason that this error is not surprising is that the thrust of history is against it. We believe that a new understanding of this topic is core to what the new church is all about. Conjugal love comes from women and men acting as equals, each needing something from the other. We can generalize this and apply it to our church. In an understanding of this newly revealed dynamic of conjugal love from the writings, we need to form a church that is truly new and free from old prejudices. Only by guiding deep insights with the right affections can the church members be given truly useful concepts to live their lives by. An all-male priesthood is too intellectually oriented, just as an all-female priesthood would perhaps be too affectionately oriented. To bring out the best of both worlds, we need both male and female approaches, working together, complementing each other, filling in what the other doesn't have. And in this way, we can achieve the perfect marriage between scriptural concepts and everyday life and feelings.
The writings are full of numbers about the importance of variety perfecting the whole, and the writings are full of numbers about the importance of love and wisdom working together. There is no more common theme in the writings.